to another episode of GTM Innovators by 360 Insight. I'm your host, Kyle James, and today we're diving into a thought-provoking sales and marketing playbook. Joining me today is Finn Thormeier. Finn is the founder at Project 33. Finn, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, man.
So you and I were kind of getting to know each other a little bit before the show started, and I spent some time kind of going through the Project 33 website, and I think the perfect place to start is like your origin story is fascinating. It looks like you're a very open book, the way that y'all do everything there. So let's start there. Like, let's start with your origin story, how you came to found Project 33, and then we'll kind of dive into some of the details about how I found you and connected with you on LinkedIn.
Sure. Yeah, let's do it. Um, I guess it started when I dropped out of college. I was studying physics and philosophy in university and dropped out because I was just doing it because it's kind of the normal thing to do. It's what you do after high school. Um, but I didn't really have a plan of what I wanted to do instead. And so I would say open-minded about where my career would go. Maybe start a company, maybe do comedy, maybe do acting. I don't know, just like
Comedy
randomly trying
acting
to
from a philosophy major. There you
I
go.
was just like, I think I just really embraced the whole like, let me actually figure out what I would want to do with my life if everything's on the table. Um, and so I thought about like, man, that's a big project. How do you even figure that out? You know, and it might take me a while to figure out what it is, right? And so I thought, what is the thing that I can already start doing now, not knowing what I want to be? And that thing was essentially like document the journey, create content around me and my life and what I was doing and the decisions I was making. And I actually started out writing a blog because like I didn't have social media. Like I was not that person that was
Yeah.
super on social media and super active. So I started blogging, realized pretty quickly that that's not the best way to build an audience organically anymore. And so like created an Instagram account, LinkedIn account, Twitter account, YouTube account, Snapchat account, all of those accounts, and just, created content around what I was thinking about and that I dropped out and who I was meeting and initial assumptions that I had and what I will try out next and all those things. And ended up flying from Germany, Bremen, where I was, to New York, really because I just realized I was too comfortable. And after I dropped out of college, I moved back into my parents' place because, I didn't have money, I didn't have cash flow, so I needed to. And I just realized that that was way too. You fall back into old patterns if
Yeah.
you live with your parents, and that was not really conducive to try to explore and learn new things about myself and who I want to be. And so I went on this walk. I haven't told this story in a while, but I went on this walk because I had this like weird gap month between I was doing like a job, a fundraising job that I was doing to make some money. But there was a month break, and so I was kind of like, what do I do with this month? Like I don't know what. And I went on this walk, put in some music. I was like, man, I should do something crazy. I should get out of here and go somewhere and just do something uncomfortable. And I was like, what's the craziest place that I could go to right now? And I was like, New York. That was somehow the place that came to mind because like it's just across the ocean, different country. I've never been to the US. I don't know anyone there. New York just, it's that dream where people go to like chase their dreams or whatever.
Yeah.
So like I
Yeah.
literally on that call after that walk, listening to that music, I walked home straight up to my computer and I booked a flight. I think it was 4 days later. Because for some reason, I already knew back then that you need to act on inspiration. And I'm pretty sure that if I had said, no, let me just sleep a night on it, think it through, I would have just woken up and be like, that's a stupid idea to go to New York. Like, why would you
Yeah.
do that? And I wouldn't have done it. So I somehow had the naive wisdom back then to just know that I had to, in that moment, book the flight, burn my boats. And so flew to New York, had a flight back a week later because you need an exit flight so that let you in so that you can
Sure.
show intent of leaving the country. Ended up staying for 3 months. Flew back to Germany, renewed my ESTA, it's like a mini visa. Came back for another 3 months. stayed in New York for 6 months, and I just like, you know, did things. Like I met people. I went to like 3 networking events every single day, all kinds of things like
Wow.
photographer meetup and yoga in the park and crypto meetup and just like, random shit. Especially if there was free food, that was the event I would prioritize. That would, uh, you know, make my New York stay easier.
Yeah.
Otherwise, I just ate cashew butter out of a jar. There was like one bodega that sold expired cashew butter for half price off, and that was like 1 or 2 meals that I had every single day. Anyway, I'm digressing. You interrupt me when I'm
No,
like
this is
too far flung,
fascinating. No,
Um,
it's your origin story is your own go-to-market story, right?
so I'm in New York. At this point, like I had been creating content for maybe 6 months after dropping out and kind of doing some, small jobs, fundraising, stuff like that, like charity fundraising. And um, I was kind of settling on Instagram, YouTube, and LinkedIn. Those were like my 3 places. LinkedIn very early on, that was when Microsoft had just bought LinkedIn, like 2018, and they had just introduced native video on
Hmm.
LinkedIn. So before that, you could only post text posts. You couldn't upload a video file onto LinkedIn. And so a friend of mine, um, told me like, yo, you gotta post videos on LinkedIn. And so I did. And so I was probably the most random LinkedIn content ever because there were all these serious business people doing it to like, whatever, create demand for the company and all these things. I was just like essentially vlogging on LinkedIn, and just like
Like the
posting this
network
video.
events that you were going to and stuff, like just
Yeah, like
sharing.
people I was meeting, just like random thoughts that I had and insights that I had. Um, and I was growing an audience. Mainly, I
Mm.
don't think because my content was great, maybe it was authentic, but it was just so early. Like no one was posting video and you were just like getting free distribution,
And they were
you know?
pushing that because they wanted more
Yeah,
people to do that. So you were like hacking the
exactly.
algorithm and probably didn't even realize it.
Exactly. And so that was happening. I was posting on Instagram. I was doing a daily vlog, weekly vlog at that time on YouTube, and going to 3 meetups every day. And one of the meetups was an Instagram growth hacker meetup. And it was all of these Instagram influencers, like big accounts who had like hundreds of thousands of followers who were like making real money through Instagram. And they were like, the idea was to kind of exchange tactics and ideas and what they were doing to grow their account and monetize it. And I was like, saw it and like went there and I probably had 3,000 followers on Instagram at that point. Um, but I went, and they did this thing where you could, in front of the whole room, kind of project your Instagram onto the wall
Mm.
and then talk through like what you're doing, why you're doing it, growth tactics you're using, what hashtags you're using, and all this stuff. And I had a motto back then that I called "Do the uncomfortable," and the idea was that if I feel uncomfortable about doing something, there's value in doing it just for the sake of doing it because it
Yeah,
means that I will have done something I was uncomfortable with, and that's already valuable on its own.
sure.
Um, so it's like, man, that would be super kind of uncomfortable to just walk up there and show these like established influencers my 3,000 follower Instagram account. And I was like, okay, now I got to do it. Shit. So I walked up, I showed them. And at the time, I was doing this thing and I was experimenting with it. Instagram had just launched Instagram story ads. So
Right.
that was a new ad placement that they had just introduced. Instagram stories were still relatively new, and then a couple months later they introduced story ads. And so one of the things that I was doing was run Instagram story ads to promote my account. So I had at point like 300 followers, but I was growing at like 100 followers a day on like a $30 per month budget because I was
Oh, wow.
spending the minimum, which was $1 a day. And I was running these ads, which was kind of like, hey, I'm this kid. I dropped out of university. I'm in New York. I don't know what I'm doing here. But if you want to follow along the journey, go here. And then the link was just to my LinkedIn, to my Instagram profile. Um, and so I was kind of using it as a follower growth tactic.
Sure.
And I presented this kind of not thinking anything crazy. And after the event, the organizer, Eduardo, approached me and he had this like big Instagram account called Pinlord at the time. And he was like, that's really cool what you did there. could you set that up for me? And I was like, sure. So we met up for coffee the next day. He bought my coffee. I was happy. And we just sat there on his laptop and I just showed him how to set it up. And after we were done, which was like 30 minutes or whatever, he was like, "What's your PayPal?" I was like, "Why?" He's like, "I want to pay you $100. This is super valuable for me. Like, I'm going to use this." It's like,
Yeah.
I was like, "No, no, no, no. Like, you got me coffee. Like, I'm happy." He was like, "No, like, what's your PayPal?" And so that's the first money I earned with kind of this whole like, I don't know, growth, personal branding type stuff. And that meeting, that Instagram growth meetup was also the first time where I kind of learned to some extent, I kind of had a hint that what I was doing was called personal branding, that
Yeah.
there was this
Yeah.
term for it. I didn't have a
Yeah.
term for it. I was just like posting random shit about what I was up to.
Yeah.
I wasn't building a personal brand in my head. Um, and so Eduardo, after paying me the $100, he also introduced me to a couple of friends that he had, and was like, "This kid, like he knows shit because he's just hacking away at things." And so
We call those growth hackers now, but really you just
yeah,
fell into
exactly.
it, right?
And so that was happening, and then at the same time, kind of, I was in New York. I was also posting these kind of vlog style videos on LinkedIn, and I just got approached by two business owners in New York and said, like, these videos that you're posting on LinkedIn, that's cool. Can you help me do that? And I'll pay you money for it. And I was just again like, why? I can show you how to do it, but why would you want to pay me money for it? You know? And so that's how it, in a sense, all started. End of 2019 was when I had a friend of mine, Ben, who was already a freelance copywriter. And so like we kind of I told him this thing, and we co-founded this thing that we called a LinkedIn personal branding agency back then. Because we kind of felt like this could be something that we do for more people. And he already knew like contracts and proposals and invoices and all these things I had no idea about. And so we started with those two customers. Obviously, didn't retain them for very long because we had no fucking idea what we were doing.
Taking it as you go.
Um,
Yeah.
but yeah, that's how it started. And then, that was kind of the birth of the agency. And then since then, it's just been a continuous process of just iteration, I guess, of narrowing down who we work with, what industry, the offer, systemizing the whole approach of how we do it, obviously improving the service delivery and all of that. So
Yeah. So let me ask you, it's fascinating. Like, have you ever heard of the 90-10 concept when it comes to content and like audiences and all this stuff? It sounds like you fell into that not even knowing that.
tell me what
Um,
it is.
and I think it's 90-10. It might be 80-20, but it's been a while. But when you think about it, it makes sense that like 90% of people consume content, 10% of people produce content,
Mm,
right? Most people are not producers. And what you're getting into is there is this Venn diagram, if you will, of
mm,
like CEOs and founders and thought leaders that have no idea how to produce the content, but those are the ones that need to be producing the content. So how
sure.
do you take them out of the 90% and put them in the 10%? And what you kind of stumbled into and have just like organically figured out is like, what is the template and process for doing those things?
Yeah.
Um,
I've just actually today read a stat that on LinkedIn it's actually 99 to 1 still.
is it even crazier than that? Okay, so
Yeah.
maybe
Yeah.
that's changed more. I guess maybe it's 99-1 and it's like
It depends on the platform because
9% of
that
the people that
also, I think
comment.
on Instagram, it's something like 77-23 or something like
Okay.
that.
But there's some crazy percentage of people that
Yeah.
just consume
Yeah.
content still, even though you can
Yeah.
produce. And really what you've kind of figured out, and is and kind of how I found you is friend of mine, Matt Stein, shout out to you, buddy. Posted something like reshared something that you put out
Mm.
recently about kind of this essentially an ABM playbook. But hey,
Mm-hmm.
if God, I'm gonna read it because at least the beginning of it because I don't want to mess it up and it's so brilliant. Like, but you're basically like if I was a CEO, if my CEO asked me to book a demo with our top 100 target accounts in the next 90 days, here's how I get it done. And then you
Mm-hmm.
literally systematically walk them through the steps of exactly how you would go about doing that.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what I find amazing. And so cool about what you're doing is you're transparent about everything. Like even on your
Mm.
website, like there's a 15-page Word document of exactly how you go about doing all
Yes.
this stuff, but then you still got people that are paying you tens of thousands of dollars just like execute upon it.
Yeah.
And I think it
That's the
really
nice
falls
thing
into
about
that.
CEOs, they have money, but they don't have time. So
Yeah.
if you can demonstrate that you know how to do something, they're super happy to just have you do it for them, even if that means, spending some money because it will save them time.
Yeah, yeah, and I think what's interesting is there's this form of kind of go to market that's become very popular, basically founder-led growth, right?
Hmm.
And it seems like that's the niche you've really taken is like how do you take these founders and let them lead the growth and generate leads and
Yeah.
sales and build out a whole process about how to do that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
And did it all just organically just like hacking and figuring it out, or was there some like light bulbs that you had along the way?
Um, No, I mean, to some extent, it's what we just started out with, because the nice thing about how Project 33 happened is that I was doing this without realizing, right? I was the
Mm-hmm.
founder, and I was putting out videos on LinkedIn and Instagram and YouTube, and that's how we got customers,
Mm-hmm.
right? And then it was natural for me to just that's the service that we also do for people. I think there was just a refinement in terms of like initially it was just anyone who wanted to like create content. So it was a lot of coaches, consultants, sometimes artists who wanted to grow on Instagram to sell their, products or whatever. And so I think part of it is just realizing who actually has a good budget. So that makes us move more to the CEO, business owner of a, company, and then at some point just realize it really helps to kind of niche down, and that's when we decided on SaaS, because 70% of our customers were already just happened to be software companies for
Interesting.
whatever reason, maybe because we're very kind of system and process driven, and that just resonates more with software founders. And so I was like, if it's already kind of naturally who we attract, let's just, put a stake in the ground and say we only work with them. And then just refining of understanding, because we also did other leaders at companies, sometimes it's the head of product or the head of HR. And I still think sometimes they're better suited than the founder, but it's just that there's this nice POV around if you happen to be the founder who's also the right subject matter experts for the ICP that you're attracting, it's so powerful if you do
Well,
it.
let's double click into that. Like a company reaches out to you, CEO,
Yeah.
founder, whoever reaches out to you that wants to work with you. How do
Yeah.
you go about that decision of like, one, are you a right fit? Are we going to work with you or not? But like, who
Mm,
is the right person in the company that could become kind of the thought leader to
yeah.
lead this kind of content initiative?
Yeah. I mean, there's a couple of elements to it. I think one is who are you selling to? Who's your ICP?
Uh-huh.
Right? If you sell to heads of HR, you need to create content that a head of HR will want to read and learn from and follow. And so you
Fair.
need to either have an HR background, you need to maybe have been in head of HR before you started this company, or at least you need to have a pulse on what's happening in the world of HR by talking to tons of these people, going to the conferences, reading up on other people. But what, for example, does not work is if you sell to VPs of engineering and then the person that you take it doesn't have an engineering background.
Mhm.
It's like that's not going to work, and that exists, right? That exists many times. It exists especially for CEOs, right? If you get hired as a CEO, you might have a private equity, sales, consulting, management background, but you're selling to product people.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
like that's probably not the right fit. So there needs to be this kind of founder audience fit so that we can then it's like, what's the depth of that? Because thought leadership is called thought leadership because it's you're leading thoughts, So by definition, most people are not thought leaders.
Right.
They're followers. They're the people who just follow and do the best practices. And so there's a difference between someone you know, um, who more or less does things by the book, as in the established consensus of how these things should be done, whether you're a head of HR or VP of engineering. Like there's the normal way of doing these things.
Yeah.
And then there's like, I actually disagree with this. I actually think the way that it's done today is broken. I actually think most of the methods that we apply today are from 10 years ago. And in 2025, you need to do it differently and in this way, right? And so, like, trying to tease that out, and it's not always easy and straightforward, but I think that's important. It's important how close you are to customers because what sometimes happens is, let's say you're a software engineer and you freelance and then you start building a software development company and you hire people and you train people and now you're like running 100 people organization that does custom software development for people.
Yeah.
You're not the software developer anymore. You're now the CEO, you're the person hiring people and managing the P&L, but you're not building product, you're not coding anymore, you're not working with these AI products. And so if that's who your ICP is, you maybe had that expertise 10 years ago when you started, but now you're not. So you're
Right.
out of the game. And so the insights that you share will be kind of out of touch. Um, that's important. So like really having a pulse on things, which
Yeah.
might just mean that you talk to 5 customers every week. Like
Yeah.
that's actually something that we ask everyone. It's like how many customers and prospects do you speak with on a weekly basis? And you will be surprised by the number of CEOs and founders of companies that are doing, let's say, 5 million or more in revenue who do not talk to customers. A lot. And
Yeah.
that's a problem because it's like that's who we're trying to attract. So unless you talk to a ton of them, you don't have a pulse on what they care about, what goals and priorities they currently have, because that's what we need to create content about. Um,
Totally believe it too. Yeah, it's what are their pains? What are their joys? Why do they like you? Why do they hate you? You need to
exactly.
understand all those things. Why are you winning versus not winning? And then solving all of
Yep.
those things. I'm curious too, because like
Sorry, I
I've
had one more thing.
oh yeah, go for it.
They need to be excited about this whole thing.
About creating
Because
content. They want to
creating content and being out there and creating a brand, because in the end, it's still you putting yourself out there. And so sometimes there's this FOMO driven thing where they see someone like, I don't know, Adam Robinson or Chris Walker or founders who are successful with this. And they're like, I should do this.
yeah,
But really, they're like despise social media and these people creating content. Or it's their CMO who tells them, like, hey, you should do this. But really, the founder's like, I don't really want to, but if you tell me CMO, then I'll do it. That's never going to work.
oh
Like they need to
interesting.
see and believe and be excited about the idea of educating people and all of those things.
So, okay, you teared up because I was going to ask you. To me, like, I think about the person, well, one, to be a thought leader, like, you literally have to go shout it from the mountaintop because if you don't say it, no one's ever going to know you're a thought leader.
Sure.
And you got to be okay, like, putting yourself out there. But I think you dove in, and tell me when I'm wrong. Like, could you identify and find and bring these people to life? Like, they have to want to teach, right? Like, they have to, like,
Yeah.
have some sort of a teacher. But are there any sort of other, identifiers or persona traits that they have that you find makes for really successful thought leaders?
They, I think there is this, it really helps not being a perfectionist
Okay,
because
double
we're
good.
not creating blockbuster content. We're creating social content. We're
Hmm.
creating 2 or 3 or 4 posts per week. So there will sometimes be, I don't know, something in the background. There will sometimes be a glitch in the video. With as much as we try, there will sometimes be a typo in the copy.
Yeah,
And if you are so hell bent of everything needs to be picture perfect, you're gonna have a horrible, horrible time.
put it out
Plus,
there, right?
it's not actually obvious that you want to have picture perfect stuff because people can tell that it's just too rounded around the edges and it just feels too perfect. It looks like
Yeah,
an ad. And so it often is actually beneficial to have a typo in there every now and then because that makes people feel like they're listening to a real person. It's the
yeah.
quality of the insight that matters, not that you miss an apostrophe or something like that. So it really helps not being a perfectionist. Um, it also really helps being willing to ruffle feathers.
Little
Because
controversial.
like yeah, it's and it's not about being controversial for the sake of being controversial and making some random statement about Trump or whatever, but it's like if you are a real thought leader, that is probably because you disagree with the consensus and you actually believe that some of the things that people do is stupid or doesn't make sense, or that some of the established companies in the space do it wrong. And unless you're willing to say that,
Mm,
not exaggerate it, but just say it the way that you think it, then it's not going to work. And again, we work with these customers sometimes and we try to identify it early on and then, you know, mutually agree that it won't work because they're trying to be too diplomatic,
yeah,
right?
yeah.
Um,
Which I
so
admit I
yeah.
struggle with, right? Because I'm probably tell from my accent, I'm from the South of the United States, and my
Mm-hmm.
mom taught me if you ain't got anything nice to say, don't say anything at all. And what
Mm.
you're saying is, well, if you don't ever say anything not nice, you're not getting controversial. You're not like ruffling feathers. You're not pushing hard buttons.
And it's
Um,
not again, it's not about lying. It's just like if that's what you think,
yeah,
then that needs to get out there, right?
yeah,
On your field. Like you don't have to, talk about your political affiliations. But if you believe something about go to market, or you saw what someone else said and you're like, Chris Walker said this, I disagree, and here's why, like that needs to go out there, you
yeah,
know?
yeah. Get that take out there. I'm curious too, working with a lot of like establishing and building thought leaders. You must have some fascinating stories of like they were kind of hesitant or wasn't sure it was going to work. Then you put out some great content and it lit up and they were absolutely shocked at the virality of it or something like that. You got any interesting stories like that or what you discovered from some of that?
I think for me, it's just sometimes, I think we want to make it work without going viral because it's hard to engineer virality. Plus, we have customers who sell to Fortune 500 CTOs.
Hmm.
That's a very small audience. You know, what are you going to say that a Fortune 500 CTO will find interesting and valuable and insightful that also reaches 100,000 people?
Mm.
Probably nothing, right? And so if that's what you're chasing, you're setting yourself up for failure. Now we do have, I remember one post we worked with this founder until he sold his company. He was previously a VP at AWS, and we created this post around before he started this company. When he was at AWS, he was tasked with finding 400 million in cloud cost savings, and we did a breakdown video. It was like a long 4 or 5 minute video around the three main levers or strategies he implemented to find those $400 million in savings. That post got like 700, 800 likes and almost 100,000 impressions, and I was just like, I would have never thought that that topic could do so well you
Yeah.
know I think for me almost the more fun ones are where, like, I remember one customer telling us that because every week we interview them, right? And we interview them around conversations they're having with customers and what they're seeing in the market and updates they're making to the product,
Yeah.
that he he always wanted the topics in advance. Customers are like half half. Some want the topics in advance, some just want to show up to the interview and answer the question. He wanted them in advance. And he had this routine where every week, I think the day before or the day off when we recorded the interview, he would do his morning walk and just reflect on the questions that we wanted to ask him.
Oh,
Not write
it's almost
down
like he was
notes,
role playing
just
it in his
like, yeah,
head.
he was role playing. And obviously, it helped create great content, but he gave us this feedback that he felt like he just had such a deeper understanding of his company and his product and his customers because he would munch on these questions that maybe on a busy day he would otherwise just not deeply think about. And so it
Yeah.
helped him when he went fundraising and had to pitch what they're doing and how and why to investors. And so that to me is almost the cooler story where there's these like side benefits. It's not about
Oh,
the
interesting.
likes, it's not about the followers, it's not about the impressions, it's about the because if you're documenting a journey and you're documenting your thoughts, like it actually helps you get clarity on
Yeah,
where you are and what you're doing and why, and it makes you think about things that you were otherwise. So it's like that's almost cooler to me because that's, when people talk about you do it for the journey, not for the outcome. That's
yeah.
the moment that they realize they're doing it for the journey. They're doing it for themselves and the benefit that they derive, not because they get 100 likes or whatever on a post.
It forces them to get clarity on what they're trying to say, and by putting it out there, they're accountable to it too.
Sure.
So yeah,
Yeah.
that I could totally see that. I can absolutely see that. Um, yeah. What else? What other like side benefits? Like that's not an obvious one, but it makes total
I
sense.
think a lot of them, because we tend to work with technical founders, so not the like natural marketers, the ones who are natural content creators, because I mean, to some extent, it's like the value add that we bring is just less. If this comes
Mm,
natural to you, why do you need us to interview you and help you with this?
Tease,
Right. So
like
it's
why would
often
anyone take
the,
it out of you? Yeah.
yeah, it's often the ones who really don't think of themselves as content creators, and so they just become better speakers because we do a lot of video. And so for video, you want to be yourself, but still you have a certain standard that you set yourself, that you don't want to just mumble around and repeat yourself and ramble, you know. And so it's just like with just as if you would do a keynote every single week
Yeah.
and you would have 52 keynotes under your belt at the end of the year, you're probably a much better speaker at the end of it. And so it's a little bit of that. So again, but that's kind of a benefit that's like you realize you become someone else through going through this process.
Yeah. Well, and you said it yourself, like y'all eat your own dog food, right? You
Yeah.
do this same process that you do that you kind of coach and
Yeah.
train people to do. And I mean, I'm just going back and pulling up this kind of post where you step by step, literally, what is this? There's 14 steps. The
Mm-hmm.
entire you give it all away.
Mm-hmm.
Um, how do you feel like that impacts kind of the people you work with and more? Because like anybody could read this and go do this, and some people
Mm-hmm.
will,
Yeah.
but I don't know. Like I don't know if I'm asking more of it clearly they know exactly what they're getting ahead of time and
Yeah.
getting into ahead of time, but
Yeah.
also like h- I don't know. Like it clearly makes sense to me. It's like content marketing. You're putting it out there.
Yeah.
You're sharing stuff. You're establishing yourself as a thought leader on how to do these things.
Yeah.
What other impact do you get from doing it that way?
Well, demos.
Mm,
That post that you pulled up there generated, I think, 21 or 22 inbound sales calls for us.
that's great.
Um,
And hopefully more after this, right?
yes, and so I think I don't know. I think one is people who just realize they can trade money for time, and yes, they could do it themselves, but it would take longer to get there. It would take more of their time, and so if they're a successful company that has revenue and customer and they're a busy CEO, they'll much rather outsource this than doing it all themselves. I think
Yeah.
that's one part. I think the other part is also, yes, it's the whole process, and there's obviously a lot of nuance to all of this stuff. Like
Yes.
there's caveats and nuances, and when you send the connection request, what exactly do you say in there? And when you ask these questions, like how do you ask follow-up questions, and how do you write the copy? Like we have a whole internal 4-hour training that I built for our copywriters on how we take an interview and an answer that a customer does into a LinkedIn post, right? And there's a whole science around how you write the hook and all these things, right? There's so many additional things that there's no way I can fit that all in there. And so I think to some extent it filters out if people read this and they're like, oh, this is really all there is to this, and I'll do it myself. That's actually the type of customer that you don't want, because they're the type of customer who after 3 months says, why are we paying you for this? Like all you do
Mm,
is like ask me a couple questions on a call, and then you clip the videos and then you upload it to LinkedIn. Because if that's how they think about it, then th that's not a long-term relationship,
Right.
right? Because it's never what you do, is how you do it, right? Like there's a
Yes.
million cold email agencies who gonna run cold emails for you, but it's not the, oh, use this software and send 100 emails per day and send a 14 step sequence. It's like, what do you say in the copy?
What's your hook? Why is it valuable? Why am I paying attention to this? Yeah.
And
How is it
so
making
there's,
my day in life better to read
yeah,
this?
there's some who are really, really great at writing this, cold email copy, and some who are just really bad at it. And so, just because someone tells you use this tool and send 100 emails per day to, 14 steps, whatever, that's the first level knowledge.
Yeah. Well, I have to ask this because this, so much of what I talk about, everybody wants to talk about these days is kind of AI related, right?
Mm,
How do you see kind of thought leadership and kind of product-led growth changing with all the introductions of AI, and how are you bringing it into your processes, right? I mean, clearly it can help
yeah,
streamline and brainstorm questions and content subjects and clean up copy grammatically and
yeah,
all that. But like, how do you
yeah,
see this evolving and changing over the next 6, 8, 12 months? Because no one could see any further out than that at this point.
yeah. I don't know. I think I'm almost like, and I do have FOMO about this sometimes. I'm probably not as deeply, experimenting with all the AI stuff as I maybe I should be.
But that's interesting. Why
Um,
not? Like that's
I don't
really
know.
interesting
There's
take
just
too.
like part of it is just I don't know what it is. I don't know if it's like some Luddite tendencies I have, but it's like I mean I played around with it but and we do experiment with things and we do use it in certain limited use cases, but I don't know. There's something in me where when everyone does this, like my natural inclination is like I'm not interested in that. And so at least the bubble that I'm in, everyone is doing AI and experimenting with AI and building with AI and telling you got to use AI and this AI agent and that AI agent. I'm sure there's a whole plethora of, the industry that does not that. But the world that I'm in, that's like what everyone does. And so I'm like,
Yeah,
I don't know. It's like my natural inclination is to be like, I don't want to
it's a contrarian
now.
take, right?
Now, I do
You
think
think that hurts authenticity? Is that you just feel
I
like
think
people
I
could
think
pick up
today,
on it?
yes, because I mean the way that at least these language models work right now is that they predict the next word based on the corpus of the internet.
Yes.
So it's kind of anti-thought leadership.
Yeah, you're never going to have
It's
anything
like
original come
it's
out of it
yeah,
for
it's
sure.
it's gonna create the most averaged out, you know, consensus answer that you can give to any question. Right. That's why, I mean, what definitely never works is, ask the thing of like the AI, write me a LinkedIn post about an interesting take about marketing. Because that's exactly contradictory to how it works.
Right.
Now, I do think so. I think you always need that thought leader. You always need that person who has that in-depth expertise and who has that differentiated point of view that is anti-consensus. And I do feel like right now we don't use AI to write the copy. We have two amazing copywriters who actually watch the conversation. They get the transcript, right, which is AI generated, I guess, but then they take the transcript and they actually write it. So we don't feed it into an LLM and say, hey, write me a LinkedIn post. We're experimenting with it. I think my hope is almost that I think right now AI is creating a whole lot more noise, right? Because it's just so easy to create content, that there's just so much more garbage on the internet now because of
Yeah.
it.
Yeah. I mean, we've
Um,
seen Moore's law of content
yeah. Now,
happen
I
crazy.
hope that the kind of bottleneck that we're solving is you have a person who actually has deep expertise in a field, right? GraphQL Federation or, you know, uh, they've been like we work with a customer right now. They've previously been the CIO at Microsoft, Disney, and VMware,
Wow.
right? Like that's insane.
Yeah, that's a cohort of one right there. No one else has
Yes.
ever done all of those.
And I mean, Microsoft, massive, massive company, and then CIO, right? Like you're the most senior leader at that company when it comes to IT. So like that person has seen things and done things and learned things that is genuinely different to what most IT people know and think,
Yeah,
right? So, but the bottleneck is they don't know content, they don't understand social media, they maybe don't want to create videos and all that, right? And we have solved that bottleneck. And hopefully, AI will help create actually long term more signal because for all those people who are not natural content creators, but who do have that genuinely genuine insight and genuine subject matter expertise, it can just help get that raw material out and get it out into the world. And so I do think in probably 12 months, if you ask me, I will have a very different answer to how we use AI. But as of today, it's mostly experimenting with it and using it in limited use cases rather than, having it write copy for us or stuff like that.
fair. Fair. That's like I said, it's a contrarian take, but there's still value in that. Well, I know, Finn, we're kind of running out of time here, and I want to be mindful of your time. What have I not asked you before we kind of wrap it up here? Like, is there anything that like I should have asked you that we should have dove into, or something that you're seeing out there, working with companies and kind of go to market that has been super fascinating and interesting that not no one's talking about?
There's no one talking about.
Well, maybe they're talking about
I
it, but it's not.
think that, and I'm probably guilty of that too, that people overcomplicate everything.
Hmm.
Whether it's how to build a product or how to build a company or how to create content. Um, with like all the tools that you can use and connecting some, workflows and an AI agent who researches this thing and then creates a draft and then feeds it into that thing that then, it's like people are obsessed with this like AI automation porn.
Uh,
And I think the it it really just comes down to who are you creating the content for, right? Maybe that's the head of HR at a manufacturing company. Understanding what is that head of HR's priorities and goals right now,
yeah,
and then being able to provide solutions for that. And that might be it's simple insight. That might be a step-by-step playbook. That might be a recommendation for them to read this or consume that so that they resolve this thing. Um, and that's it. And then yes, like how you engineer the hook and all of that, that's important, sure. And like what tool you use for automating this. But and that's to me still the hopeful thing is that
keep it
people.
simple, stupid. You very much
Yeah, and,
thought,
and and
yes,
people often I see people raging about like the LinkedIn algorithm and it's promoting this like shitty, fluffy content and whatever. And maybe there's some truth to it, but again, it works because people consume them stuff, right? It's like fast food. It's like
yeah.
you can complain about it or you can understand why it works and why we're naturally inclined to eat this stuff. But it is also still true that if you have a genuine insight, a genuine thought, a genuine tip or strategy that genuinely helps someone, it does well.
Yeah.
And so if you just focus on that, be very clear on who you're talking to, understand what they care about, not by guessing, but by talking to these people, and then put in the hard work to figure out how do you solve that for them. And I think again that's where like
That's
the
never changed, right? Like that's
yeah,
never changed. It's always been there. People are just always looking for shortcuts.
quality still wins,
Yeah.
and quality might not always think for it. is not always what you think it is in terms of, high production quality and you got a green screen in the background. Quality is inside. Um, and so, I think one of the best people on LinkedIn probably right now is Gal Aga, who's the CEO at Aligned. He goes like viral every week.
Mm.
But look at his posts. His posts are super long, super in depth, and sharing incredible level of insight, right? It's
Mhm.
not some fluffy viral TikTok video that he's sharing, but, and I interviewed him on my podcast, he spends 2 to 3 hours per LinkedIn post, because it's it's the genuine exercise of thinking about, okay, who am I speaking to? In his case, it's enterprise account executives. It's what do these people like care about right now? Like, what are their problems? What are their desires? What are they stuck at? Which again, you only arrive at those things by actually talking to these people and having a pulse on things, going to their events, reading their content, and then sitting down. Okay, I know that one of the things they struggle with is, whatever, end of quarter is approaching. They have a couple of deals stalled in pipeline. They're still only at 70% quota, and they're losing sleep trying to figure out how they move forward these stalled deals to hit 100% quota, right? And then just sitting down with all of your expertise and all of your insights and all of the things that you've seen and heard, and just thinking it through, what you would tell that AE if your life depended on helping them achieving that, right? Hitting that
Yeah.
100% quota at the end of the quarter when a couple of big deals stalled. And that's probably not a quick, like 2 minute take of like, oh, just reach out to them. But it's genuinely sitting down and writing it down, being like, no, wait, but this wouldn't work because in that case, so I actually need to approach it differently. But then what tool would I use for this? Let me do some research. Oh, this tool exists. Great. Let me mention it here. And, like what would I actually say in the email that I would send them? Because obviously a lot depends on what you say in that email that you let me like spend some time to craft the perfect email that I would write to these people. Like it's spending time. It's because writing is thinking.
Yes.
And so I don't know. I just think that and that's a real moat because the thing is I know that intellectually, and it's still hard for me to just say I'm just going to spend 3 hours writing this LinkedIn post because it's so easy to just spend 10 minutes, 20 minutes, 30 minutes and write something that's decent.
Yeah.
Right? If you've been in your space for a while and you've done some things, like it's pretty easy to relatively quickly write something decent, create something decent, right? But to then say, let me spend an additional 2.5 hours to just make it great, you're like,
Yeah. Especially knowing
because
that there's a good chance it'll be disappeared a week from now.
well, and you can't predict performance.
Right.
That's the because it's not like someone can guarantee you just spend those 2.5 hours and then your post will blow up because if you could guarantee it, then everyone would do it. But there's obviously the risk that you spend those 2.5 hours, put in all those sweat, blood, sweat, and tears, and then it still only gets 10 likes, right? Now, is the chance much higher that it will do much better if you spend those 2.5 hours? Yes, but it's not guaranteed. And so,
Right.
even me who knows this, I'm like, do I? But that post that you saw, that was 3 hours, right? That
Yeah.
was me
Yeah.
actually spending 3 hours because I wrote it and then I had, you actually need to think it through and you're like, no, wait, this step needs to actually happen before this step because otherwise I don't have the information to be able to do this. So you like rearrange things and you're like, wait a second, now that I have this info, I should also be doing this. And so you like craft it.
Yeah.
And then I ended up with something that had 6,000 characters and LinkedIn's character limit is 3,000. So that was another hour of me like
Gotta like
pruning
cut it
it
down.
and
Yeah.
kind of chiseling it and being like, okay, how do I get this down to 3,000 characters? What's all the redundant information? What are maybe the steps that are not quite that necessary? How can I say this more concisely? Um, but that's time, right? And I'm writing one right now, and I'm trying to be like, okay, you just invest the time until it's there. But I'm like, Maybe I just ship it now because who knows? Like I might just post, spend all that time, and then it gets only, 20 likes, and then I'll feel like a fool. So I
Yeah,
think there's a real moat in allowing yourself to actually take this to its natural conclusion and just spend that. Like there's a reason why Mr. Beast, the number one YouTuber, biggest YouTuber with the fastest growth, is putting out one YouTube video a month when everyone else is putting out daily YouTube videos or at least weekly.
right, right. It takes time to do the content that
And
they're
he
doing.
understood that it's much more powerful to create one perfect or close to perfect banger video doing something that everyone thinks is just absolutely over the top and it's insane that you would do this for a YouTube video once a month. Then he could easily create really good YouTube videos twice a week. Easily. I mean, he has a massive team, massive budget. He could easily create a top 0.1% YouTube video twice a week. But he understands that going from a 0.1%, top 0.1% YouTube video to top 0.001 YouTube video is exponentially more powerful than having eight of those other ones.
Yeah.
And so I don't know.
No, it's fantastic. That's yeah. It's probably a contrarian point take, right? But I think it's a really great like leaving thought for people. This is super insightful. Let me ask you this, how can the audience help you? I mean, definitely we'll include in the link in the show notes, kind of to that LinkedIn post we kind of connected us.
Yeah.
Your website. You also mentioned a podcast. How else can, people find and connect with you on LinkedIn and make sure you follow them so you can get access to this next brainstorm that's coming. But
Oh
yeah,
no,
Finn,
now you're setting the bar
how
high.
can the
See,
audience
that's the
help you?
problem.
Now you have to put it out.
Um, yeah, I mean, on LinkedIn, I do have my own podcast, the Founder of That Marketing Show. And other than that, I mean, I love when, I'm a content creator, when people either tell me what resonated or a follow-up question they have, because that informs,
Mm,
you know, because to some extent you're like a comedian on stage and you're throwing some shit against the wall, and then you need to gauge the reaction that you're getting to kind of lead you down a path. So
yeah,
when I get that information, it's super useful.
yeah. Well, I'll leave it to the audience. If you liked this episode, enjoyed this episode, like and subscribe, leave a comment, share it with Finn, your favorite part. What did you enjoy? What can he do better? What does he need to polish and go
Yes,
back and
there you
like
go.
sculpt better? But what are the parts that really resonated with you? And I'll leave it at that. Thanks everybody for watching, and we'll be back next weekend with another GTM Innovators. And everybody keep growing out there. Take care.